Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss the action that the French authorities are taking against British fishing vessels, as well as the wider threats of further imminent action next week, in fact. What the British government say they're going to do about it, not a lot actually, and what it might mean for the future of our immediate post-Brexit strategy. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So if you were wondering what the next Brexit disaster was going to be, here it is. There's a lot to say about this. I'm trying to restrict myself in this video because do you know what? This is going to be the topic of next week. French authorities seized a British fishing vessel in French waters that did not have a licence to fish there. Now, it is doubtful that such forceful action would have been taken but for the fact that the UK is not complying with our end of one of the terms in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. A lot of French fishermen are being denied licences, with a number of procedural obstacles being put in their way. It's an act of petulance, really. In order to get his Brexit deal, Johnson had to agree to let EU fishing vessels continue to fish in British waters under basically the same circumstances as before we left the single market. So in an act of what I can only assume is spite, although there are other alternatives, the Jersey authorities have been difficult about issuing licences to as many French fishing vessels as they can manage. I'm not actually sure if it was just petulance because, you know, I don't know whether they thought they were creating a bargaining chip for the future, but I am going to be coming on to that point later on the video. On the face of it, it would seem to have failed either way. Of course, they could have just done it for headlines in the Daily Mail, in which case this outcome is not bad either because more headlines in the Daily Mail. It's allowing the Tory Brexit press in general to engage in their favourite pastime, moaning about the French. But it's more serious than a single fishing vessel being detained. Because at the end of the day, do you know what? If they didn't have a licence, who's really going to complain about that? It's the threats of imminent follow-up action, which is to take place from next Tuesday. France has said it's going to step up customs and SPS checks on goods passing from Britain through their ports. Now, this is a major concern. Apart from anything else, if this action carries on for some time, then we were going to be getting shortages this Christmas anyway of food. Those shortages are now going to be way more severe. People are going to notice. Johnson won't care though. He won't care about that. He'll have his Christmas dinner. The trade barriers we have erected can be made more or less severe purely at the whim of authorities on one side of the border or the other. You know, despite the moaning about sandwiches being confiscated in January, EU countries have by and large been applying a reasonably light touch to checks because checks are effectively about risk. You know, you don't check absolutely every part of every consignment of every shipment. It would take forever. You might as well just close your borders to trade completely if you want to do that. So you carry out a level of checks that you think appropriate to balance risk and trade. But we don't carry out checks on EU imports ourselves. We gave all EU countries bordering us a massive advantage in that regard. See, France can ramp up the level of checks on imports from Britain and not risk similar action from the British. We can't ramp up our checks because we don't do any. If this threat is carried out and there's no robust legal argument against it that I'm aware of, then our exporters will face an even tougher time in the run-up to Christmas. And as I say, we will struggle to get imports as well because although we're not doing checks, if you block up the outgoing traffic, you also bung up the incoming traffic because there's like a big old roundabout there. You know, and all the government will do is blow more hot air about this all being France and the EU and whoever else they want to blame. The second threat, it's not really a threat, they've said they're going to do it next Tuesday, is to close off most French ports to British fishing vessels. Legally on dodgier ground here, but an interesting test case. Now, the UK government has complained to both the French authorities as well as the EU Commission. I'm not quite sure why they've complained to the EU for France taking unilateral action as a sovereign nation. I thought the Brexiteers in the Tory party were all about sovereignty. So why do they expect the EU to dictate to France what it should do about its own border arrangements? A little bit of hypocrisy there, don't you think? But anyway, this provides an interesting test case, as I say, and I'm afraid British fishermen will once again lose out in another Brexit experiment. See, as far as I'm aware, France are not in their legal rights to do this. It is a breach of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. They physically can do it, and they're going to do it, but they shouldn't. Not that any Brexiteers get to complain about it, because they have been aggressively arguing for the British government to break international law and our Brexit treaties. They do not get to complain about France proposing to do the same. I can complain, they can't. Now, France has announced that it will be carrying out these measures from next Tuesday, like I said. If they are prepared to take this action, they will be prepared to do even more. Let's make no bones about this. This is a dodgy move from France. It's no worse than what we have been doing. So people can say, oh, it's justified because we've been doing the same. Well, two wrongs don't make a right, but it is no worse than what we've been doing. I noticed, however, that other EU countries weren't exactly falling over themselves to justify the move. The EU, I think, collectively has wanted to carry out action that is legal. There exists the possibility, however, for the EU, or even just France unilaterally, to restrict our access to energy as well. They haven't said they're going to do that, but it is a threat. It's like the sword of Damocles, that one. Now, there is already the risk, quite apart from any acts of bad faith, there is already the risk that we might lose some access to EU-produced energy due to those global issues that the Brexit gammons keep going on about. Because the EU, if they struggle to manage to produce enough energy themselves, they may well vote to prioritise those in the single market over third countries. So that's a risk anyway, quite apart from this little spat. But France may well unilaterally elect to do the same thing, not because of this issue, but purely in retaliation for their own fishing communities. Because the thing is that France's political system does not allow their government, unlike ours, to abandon their industries and continue in power. Macron is under pressure to do something. He will have to do something. If he is prepared to deny British fishing vessels access to most French ports, then he will absolutely be prepared to restrict our access to electricity as well, maybe even gas. We are very reliant on a lot of imports coming in through France. If our access to gas is restricted, that will be a double whammy, because we already will not be able to cope with a restriction on electricity from France. But half of our own domestically produced electricity uses gas. Another reason that this action from France would be interesting is that they are one of the two most influential members of the EU. The EU is already said to be running out of patience with Johnson's antics and might have been getting ready to take retaliatory action of their own, albeit entirely legal action. If France actually acts to take unilateral action, you can bet your arse they'll be lobbying other EU members hard to organise a coordinated response. Now, whether that lobbying succeeds or not, why we should be concerned is that the bulk of our trade needs to pass through French ports to get anywhere. An effective trade war with even just France on its own, never mind the wider EU, may well play well to the Brexit gammons, and Johnson himself may get a boost in the polls. It's curtains for many of our businesses if sustained. So many businesses cannot manage without trade with Europe, whether it is exporting to Europe or importing raw materials. They cannot manage without energy either. They cannot manage with unreliable and expensive energy, certainly, because remember, they don't get rates capped. If there are further shortages, prices will go up. They will have to pay more. If they can't afford it, they just have to stop. So many jobs on the line over this. Johnson surely cannot get away with this sort of trade war in the long term. But of course, he doesn't think long term. The question is, can he get away with it long enough to bang out a quick election? If so, he'll be loving this. And he may have even been hoping France would have done it. It may even be something he's been waiting for in terms of the timing on suspending the Northern Ireland Protocol. But I've got a specific video on that for tomorrow, I think, certainly over the next couple of days. We've seen in the past how unpopular governments have seen a resurgence in popularity when involved with international conflict. Right-wing populists have a history of stoking foreign wars, even just trade wars, in order to shore up support at home. And there's nothing the opposition can do. If they blame the government for the action, they'll be accused of being unpatriotic and on France's side. And obviously you can't expect the mainstream media in this country to, brief against Johnson either. They'll be right behind him. Because that's where we are now. We have a government that wants our country to face economic sanctions because it strengthens their political base. If that is not a sign of a failed state, I do not know what is. This could be a deliberate ploy on the part of Johnson. It is possible that he has wanted to provoke France into this action. According to a report, Jersey's approved 90.3% of the fishing licence applications. Well, that sounds quite a lot, but the government are claiming it's 98%. It's not. It's 90.3%. Now, if, as seems likely, the bulk of the ones that they're being difficult about and denying are French, then this absolutely looks like a deliberately coordinated action to treat French fishermen unfairly, singling them out, knowing that the French do not take such things lying down, that they would inevitably put a lot of pressure on their government, who would then be forced to act. This may be exactly what Boris Johnson wants to happen. Now, whether he gets away with it in terms of a polling boost may depend on how hard the EU respond. If they just leave France to it, and the response is therefore below the threshold needed for the public to really feel the pinch, then Johnson wins. Because it doesn't matter how much it damages our economy. People don't see the economy. It doesn't even matter if people lose their jobs. If they don't see those job losses as being caused by this, they won't blame the government. What matters is, are they going to suffer, and will they link that suffering to this action? If the EU go in hard with everything and the impact is felt across the country, then people whose jobs are on the line, do you know what? They don't really care about some crazy political game of chess. They care about their own livelihoods. And they will expect the government to sort it out, and quickly, before they lose those jobs. You know, this is seriously high stakes now. But those are my thoughts, the first of many, no doubt. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.